Hello, I'm Bruce Zimmerman, and this is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week. Apples. Yes, pretty well everybody likes apples. Don't know anybody who's allergic to them, but there are so many different varieties. I think there's almost as many varieties of apples as there is dogs and cats. The Apples of North America is a book by Tom Burford, and it covers 192 exceptional varieties for gardeners, growers, and cooks. I think the last part's the most important part for cooks, because if you can cook them, you can eat them not just off the tree. And you can preserve them and have them even at this time of year. So, Apples of North America by Timber Press. And one of the great things about going through here was I saw apples that I'd never heard of. Apples I had only ever heard of but never even seen. All the apples are represented from A to Z in the first half of this book. And then what they've done is they've put them in alphabetical order. So if you know what the name of the apple is, you can go and look it up quite easily. You know your alphabet. I mean, it's been a few years since you probably learned the alphabet, but you can work it out. So it starts with A, of course, and it does a little bit of history, by the way, of the apple. And it starts with, of course, American Beauty. And it moves all the way through many of the great apples, and that is like Bushy Mountain Limber Twig. I'm sure you've heard of that one. Or Davy, or Crow Egg, and Fortune, and Fanny, and Golden Nugget. Golden Delicious, I'm sure you've heard of. There's some Pippins in here, and some Golden Russets. Now, these are the real good old-fashioned russets. Granite Beauty is in here. And there are many, many, many others. Here's one called Hawkeye, and I stopped at this one because it's probably one of the most beautiful red apples I've seen. It has a sweet floral aroma, and it is, for that reason, very, very memorable. It will bring back memories from the first time you ate it, etc., which is always excellent, particularly as you're getting older. And Hawkeye is an apple that's been around since the 19th century, and it was grown mainly out in the Iowa or the American Midwest. It has a pure white flesh that's tender, fine grain, crisp, which my wife demands, juicy, mild flavor, and distinctively memorable aroma. The tree is vigorous and adapts to a lot of different soils, so it's fairly easy to grow. Disease resistant, is somewhat susceptible to fire blight and cedar apple rust. Almost every apple is. And it ripens in mid-fall, so it's not too late. It's considered a dessert apple. It's not suitable for cooking or making cider, and its storage quality is fair. So you want to eat this one and be certain you eat it all up as opposed to storing. That's the type of information you're going to get on these 192 different varieties of apples. And there's some really ugly ones like Pilot. I'm going to leave that one just for you to go look at. These are all in full color. Damon apple, still around. I've seen that one. There's a lot of the different Pippin apples in here, and there's all different kinds. Sweet wine saps in here. Washington strawberry was kind of neat. Wealthy, I've seen. I think I've actually had a Wealthy. There is some really, really unusual ones in here, like Wolf River and Yellow Bellflower. So it really works all the way across the gamut of the alphabet. Now, when you get into part 2, you're getting into a lot of the planning, designing of an orchard, the layout, the care, the ways and the way to select the site, and varieties for the site as well. It also goes into planting, nutrition, pruning, irrigation, harvest, etc. I think one of the most important parts is not just the pruning, but also it covers all the different ways of pruning. Whether you're doing a central leader, a modified leader, an open center, etc. And that's all covered in here. It covers the major apple diseases and pests, but the propagation section is probably superior. Full color pictures on how to graft and bud, and it's just very, very explicit, very well laid out, and very easy to follow and explain. Now, the best part, of course, for me is always the eating part. And what they do in this section towards the back is they cover apple products, such as apple cider. That's always a good thing. A good apple cider is hard to get. The also covers apple vinegar and making apple vinegar, which is pretty good. I can eat apple vinegar. Apple butter. I haven't had apple butter since I was a boy. It was considered a delicacy. How to dry apples is covered, and drying your own. So this book will cover it all, but one of the most important sections, and they leave it way to the back, sort of hide it in the back, and I think it should really have been up front, and that is the recommended uses of apple varieties. So it covers the varieties that are good for apple butter, apple sauce, baking, cider, dessert varieties with a distinctive flavor, drying varieties, and frying varieties. Yes, it covers frying apples. How about pie-making varieties, pickling varieties, vinegar-making varieties, ornamental varieties, common storage varieties, late-blooming varieties for frost zones. That's important. Cold chill varieties for warmer regions. So all of it's covered in here as well. So an excellent book. One that I only sort of looked at quickly and then decided, gee, I don't have a book on apples. Let's take a closer look. And once I took a closer look at this book, I realized the value of this not only as a reference book, but also as a great book for the home gardener to try a bunch of things. Because how many times have I seen for sale in a garden center a 5-variety apple tree for sale at some ridiculous price? But if you could get the budwood from different varieties that you like, and you have a single apple, you could put the different varieties in, have them ripen at different times for different purposes, and at the same time, you're going to use less space. Because remember, apple varieties need 2 different varieties at the proper pollen stage to ripen and set the fruit. So, if the pollen ripens in May to the 15th of May, then the other varieties have to also ripen at that time in order for the bees and the pollen to cross-pollinate and wind-pollinate the varieties of apples on your apple trees. So selection, orchard layout is important, but it's also great if you have only one tree in your orchard and you've got it all grafted or budded up into different varieties, that you pick the right varieties. And this book will help you do that as well. So that is the Apple Varieties of North America, 192 Exceptional Varieties for Gardeners, Growers, and Cooks by Tom Burford. A book well worth adding to your home library, particularly if you happen to like apples. It'll also tell you about the different varieties when you go to the grocery store, if you have to buy them as well, and what to expect from them. I'm Bruce Zimmerman. This is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week.